people say to me, you're concerningly obsessed with Lost, and to them I simply reply, aren't we all? Welcome to Lost All Caps.
Nice.
I'm Ariel Hebditch.
And I'm Velvet Hebditch.
Forgive me for not coming up with a better intro, but we have had an ordeal.
It's been a day.
Today.
It's been a day.
Let's unpack this. So, I bought a new can of hairspray, and it wasn't working. I was pressing it down as hard as I could, and basically nothing was coming out, like a tiny dribble of spray was coming out.
Yeah.
And we were trying to fix it together, which involved pulling the nozzle off, putting a paperclip down the sort of mechanic machinery of the hairspray can with such force that we managed to break it completely.
Yeah, so it's worth mentioning there were other things we tried first. We tried things like running it under hot water and putting like a needle through like the main bit.
The nozzle was fine.
They're like standard issues, but the nozzle was fine. It was something to do with the thing. And then I found if I press down on it, I was like, maybe if I create pressure by pressing down on it, it will actually like release a normal amount of hairspray and not just like a dribble. And so I pressed down on it really hard and something inside broke.
Fuck knows what happened. All I know is that we put the nozzle back on and it was spraying properly, but only air was coming out until you tilted it fully upside down, in which point all of the liquid would fall out.
It was like a certain angle you were like, 45 degrees, air. What's next?
90 degrees.
90 degrees. Like air, but a little bit of a dribble, and then you get to like
180 is fully down.
125. The middle one.
125 degrees precisely.
And suddenly, everywhere.
Fucking flood. And then, my earring's fallen out. I can't catch a break today, honestly. And then Velvet had the bright idea of just like, we've got the hairspray liquid. Why don't you just do your mohawk here? And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then they sprayed the hairspray into my hands, and I was tilted over the bath, pushing my hair up like this. If I put my hand on this side of my head, the shaved part, it's solid.
It's crispy.
It's so crispy. My hair looks a mess. I've inhaled toxic fumes. And to make matters worse, when we were eating our lunch, I was having prawn cocktail crisps and a crumb went directly in my tear duct. Stung so bad. It really hurt. I started crying. It's been a day.
And then the audio recording wouldn't work. I couldn't get the mics to record properly. I thought we'd broken the microphones. And I've been so preoccupied with all of this that I've forgotten everything I had to say about the episode. Yeah. And we only watched it this morning.
The lengths we fucking go to bring this podcast to you people.
So let's get started.
Great.
So season 1, episode 4, Walkabout.
Indeed.
It's a great episode.
It is a great
is the
episode.
Thing. It's a really good episode. I've always kind of ranked it as one of the best ones, but I've noticed, like, I know I said this to you earlier, and I think you said the same, like, I just don't have as much to say about it, I feel, as I did about, like, the previous episodes we've recorded. And I was just thinking about it, just like a few minutes ago, and like actually maybe the reason for that is that like I think it's one of those episodes where when you see it for the first time, it's like groundbreaking, insane, changes everything, but then kind of at this point we're like, yeah, we know there's magic on the island, we know that because we've watched all 6 seasons, so like watching back and discovering that John can walk on the island, it's not as like huge of a deal,
Yeah.
So I think that might, like, I think I've watched it and I'm just like, yeah,
to me it wasn't like, I don't know, the magic on the island is not what I would point out at this point. I mean, sure, he says like a miracle happened here and now we know what the miracle
is that he was in a wheelchair before.
But I mean, my brain didn't immediately jump to magic.
Really? Because mine did. There's a monster in the woods.
Yeah.
And this man couldn't walk until the plane crashed, and now he can stand.
Yeah, okay.
That's magic. That's magical.
Yeah, I guess I was like, because so much weird shit has happened already that I was like, oh wow, yeah, okay, there is something mystical here. But also, like, you know, it could have been like the impact of the crash.
I mean, I guess, like, there's something
Probably
to be
not,
said.
but like,
there's something to be said in theory for the, like, you know, adrenaline and things like that. But if he says he's been in the wheelchair for 4 years,
yeah,
I think if he could walk, which of course some wheelchair users can't walk, but can walk even, but like the way it's done,
yeah,
the implication is he hasn't stood up like unaided for 4 years.
It may have become apparent very quickly that I have zero medical knowledge. But yeah, I mean, I think the crazy thing about this episode is the reveal, basically. And yes, it is that he can now walk and he's doing all of this stuff. Like, he's going out into the jungle and hunting boar and all of this. Yes. But it's the way... It's the flashbacks make this episode for me.
Oh,
I
definitely,
love the flashbacks.
definitely.
And I love the way that they're shot and the way that he's like... Once you go back and rewatch it, you realise that he's either sat down or lying down in all of them.
Yeah, he's like waist up behind tables,
Yeah.
or he's laid on the bed, and you don't see it. And actually, we discovered from the audio commentary, he is sitting in the wheelchair in all of the scenes they filmed. So he isn't just sitting under a table like when he's in his office. Mm-hmm. He is in the wheelchair. So it is like the right angle. They've just kind of shot it in such a way that you can't see it, which I think is a really interesting way to do it.
Incredible, yeah.
Because they've committed to that, like, he's in the wheelchair, we just don't see it. Mm-hmm. And he is literally, like, Terry O'Quinn was in that wheelchair, which I think is great.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I do think it's really brilliant. And I think...
But not only that, like, even before we get that reveal, the flashbacks in this episode are so incredible because you have Locke on the island suddenly taking charge. First of all, he's been a completely mystical character up until this point. We know nothing about him, and he seems very kind of like magical in himself. And then he suddenly has all of this expertise, and he like comes out of nowhere saying like, right, I'm gonna lead this expedition.
Yeah, and he throws that knife, and it's like, you've got to know what you're doing to throw that thing.
Yeah. And then it's like, and then for us to find out that in the normal world, in the real world, he's such a nobody.
Yeah,
He's
it's
like
that, like, there's that brief moment where he's been called Colonel Locke, that you go, there's this very brief moment when you go, oh, he's like a secret agent or something, because he's in this office, but he's got this, like, you know, mysterious phone call. Is he like a secret, you know, I don't know, FBI, I don't know how American spies work, but
CIA.
CSI Miami,
Hawaii 5-0.
But then it's like immediately, it's like he's playing like a war game.
Yeah.
And then you're like, he just seems like such, without meaning to be too mean, he's such a loser.
Yeah.
Like, he's such, in a really sad way.
Yes.
Yeah, like often, you know, I'll say loser in a very affectionate way, but this is actually a really sad kind of use of the word, that he really just kind of has nothing going on.
Yeah.
And all he wants is to do this, you know, to have the adventure and have the walkabout. And, you know, I mean, he got his adventure.
I mean, hello, the ultimate walkabout.
The ultimate walkabout.
The island.
Being on the island.
Survival and all of that. Yeah.
I
mean, there's a lot to talk about in this episode, but I am going to just jump to my favourite flashback. We talked about the one where he's playing the tabletop game. I love that one mainly because his boss Randy is such a dick to him.
Oh my god, Randy's so awful.
He's horrible.
And like I don't play war games, but I'm a D&D player.
Oh yeah.
And like I see that and I'm like, oh, that's so fun. It's all like the complicated stuff, and then like he's just so mean.
Yeah. We are huge board games nerds in this
Massive
household.
board games losers.
We love it. But yeah, it's like, it's the way he's so brutal for no reason, and then it's like, and there's a line where he says like, you know, obviously he says like, you can't do that, and then that leads up to the iconic don't tell me what I can't do. But there was something else that I've completely forgotten where he specifically says like, someone like you couldn't do it, or something like that.
Yeah.
He drops in a kind of hint.
A bit of a hint that like, watching it back, you know that he's getting at the fact that he's in a wheelchair.
It's just, yeah.
I mean, it's just so mean. No, it's really horrible.
But my favourite flashback in this episode is the one where he's on the phone. I love that one.
Interesting.
Because it's like, it's just set up in such a brilliant way, because you think that he's just talking to his, you know, wife or partner or girlfriend.
Yeah. And it's that, like, I'm not supposed to meet customers.
Oh, it's just devastating.
And
the kind of, like, really long pause that she has and stuff. And she feels so sorry for this guy, and you feel so sorry for him, because you're like, oh my god, he's, like, ringing up this, like, I don't know what you'd call it, like a
call centre thing.
And it's just like, you know.
And it's like he must have called enough times that he, you know, she knows him.
Yeah.
And it's like, he says, like, do you remember the Walkabout? And she's like, it's all you've talked about for months. So, like, this poor guy has, like, no social life outside of, like, his work. And then he's just calling this woman all the time.
Yeah. And it really hits you. And I think the kind of framing of that scene where he's, like, sat up in the bed as well is so brilliant. And I just, that's my favourite flashback of this episode.
And I do think this series of flashbacks kind of does a really good job of, like, contextualising a lot of John's behaviour later in the series. Like, you don't get it so much in this episode, because obviously we've kind of only just met him. Like, we've known him from the first 3 episodes, but this is really the first time we meet him. And I think, looking back at this, when you've thought about all the stuff from before, from all the stuff that he kind of does later on, that knowing that he was so lonely and so disconnected, it really does a good job of just immediately driving that point home, and then immediately you know that. And so later on, when he kind of behaves in a way that you're like, is that how not, you know, is that the right way to act? You can kind of remember that, you know, that he's so disconnected prior to being on the island.
I'm not to spoil the show too much, but we love John. We love John Locke, but there are moments when he annoys us.
John has his eras.
He does.
He's a bit like Taylor Swift. He has his eras. He has his very interesting and mysterious eras, and he has his really annoying eras, and then he has his I'm entirely neutral on this eras. And he kind of goes in that. There's kind of one of each in each series, I find.
Ooh, interesting.
Like, as it goes through, you kind of have your moments where you're like, this is really interesting, he's doing some really exciting things. And you have your moments where he does something and you're just like, okay, now I really dislike you. And then he has his moments where you're just like, I don't really understand what he's doing, and I'm just going to kind of watch it in an entirely neutral way.
Okay, I'm going to have to check in
on that. Currently, obviously, he's in a mysterious era.
He's in a great era at this minute, because we get the wonderful backstory, and also he's
this is a great time for John. It's a great time for John.
But one thing that I was going to say is that, like, at times he can be very aggressive, and I always thought that was out of character for him. But in this episode, you do get sort of, like, hints towards that.
You do, yeah.
So I'm particularly thinking about the scene between him and the guy at the Walkabout,
the Australian man, yeah.
When he says, like, don't talk to me about fair, and he slams his fist on the table.
Yeah.
And obviously that's delivered in such a powerful way, and I think the kind of aggression coming out there is really good, because obviously he could have just flipped his lid with Randy earlier, but he doesn't, and it's there when he really feels
definitely
like
he's got a lot. He seems to have a lot of anger. He has a lot of aggression. That I think he kind of tries to keep under wraps, but often it just kind of comes out, which is an interesting thing to have as a character, to have just an angry character, who also, you know, he can also come across as really, really nice and really sweet, and like the way he is with Walt is so lovely, that then, like, suddenly he's having these outbursts. It's a really interesting kind of duality to have within his character. So in this episode, we were also introduced to a very important sort of side figure on the island, which is the boar.
I did not know where you were going with that.
I could tell from the look in your eyes. So the boar,
yes,
are introduced, I think, in a really clever way, where they're, I mean, of course, it's really grim. They're eating the dead bodies, but, like, I like that it's them who make themselves apparent, rather than the plot being, we're running out of food, we're going to go into the woods and we're going to hunt. It being they're all woken up in the middle of the night by this, not attack, but this presence, like, in the camp, to then be going, well, now that we know they're there, we can then go for them.
Yeah, that's
because they've run out of food. I just think it's an interesting way to go about it, and I think the boar, they come up a lot. They're, you know, because they're the main source of food for a lot of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of our first instance, and it's our first instance as well of, like, them living off the island.
Yeah.
So rather than previously they've entirely been eating the food and drinking the water that they've gotten off the plane, and there's this gradual movement in these early episodes from just surviving on the, like, the man-made things and the things they've scavenged from the plane to then moving into like surviving off of the land, so to speak, living on the island. And it's an interesting transition of when they start to accept that they have to use the island's resources rather than just saying someone's going to rescue them and they're going to be fine.
Also, one thing that I didn't notice until this watch through is that sort of shot at the beginning pre-title sequence. Obviously there's all that chaos with Jack yelling run, and then everyone's, like, falling over each other and stuff, and then it ends with someone, I can't remember, maybe Claire, going, what was that? And then John going, boars.
Yeah.
And he has this weird little smile on his face.
Boars.
He's like,
I love John's little smiles. He always smiles at really strange times.
yeah. Well, hello, the orange
The
peel.
orange moment, of course, is the first time we see him, is his iconic smile. No, it's great. And it's nice as well, because I thought his first kind of introduction in that episode was the knife moment. So, yeah, I didn't kind of clock that either, that the boars. It's a really fun scene. Also, I really did laugh when I think Claire says someone's in there, and then Jack goes, it's Sawyer, and he's like, I'm behind you.
Yeah, what did he say? Right behind you, jackass.
Something like that.
Yeah, I love the way that that's filmed as well, because the camera, like, pans
over.
over to him and then immediately pans back.
It's like oh crap, is he behind me? You know?
Yeah. No, I'm in front of you.
It's the like yeah. It's really funny because obviously, like, that's your assumption as well as a viewer, that he's in there because we've seen him stealing stuff, and I just think it's framed in a really stupid way, which makes me laugh a lot. Also, with the knife, the introduction of the knife scene has one of my favourite lines. Maybe not a favourite line, but it's one of the funniest lines I think in the whole show, which is, how did you get that knife on board? Checked it. Checked it. No explanation. There's no, I was going on a hunting holiday. There's no, like, I had to get special, none of that. I checked it.
I love that.
And
that's
then he
so typical of
opens,
Locke.
and then he doesn't even mention that he's got all the other knives.
I know.
When he says he checked it.
But hang on, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We need to talk about this scene properly, because this is a great scene. There's so much going on. It starts off with the fight between Hurley and Sawyer.
Crazy.
What? I'd have completely forgotten that.
I don't remember that.
No. And then they break up the fight, and they find out he's hoarding all the peanuts. And when I first heard that, I was like, oh, this is another comedy moment. I guess you're kind of, you know, conditioned to think that way because it's Hurley, right?
Yeah.
Hurley and Charlie are, like, our two comedy characters. And him, like, talking about peanuts, you're like, oh, it's kind of just like a frivolous thing, like, why do peanuts matter? And then they go, no, that's all we've got left.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, what? All we have left is peanuts, and Sawyer has them all?
No.
This is the worst thing ever!
It's a huge deal, and it's that, like, what happened to the rest of the food? There is no rest of the food.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah. And then it's immediately down to Jack and Saeed to try and stop putting out the fire as soon as it started. And I love that Saeed says sustenance as well. Can we just comment on that?
No, I noticed that he says sustenance. I liked that. Because then I think it's Sawyer who then goes, and what will we use for sustenance?
Sustenance, yeah. Oh my god. My hair just wobbled.
I did, I saw it.
Sustenance. Yes, and one thing that they, the director of this episode, who I believe is Jack Bender, did he say he was the director?
Yes, I think so.
We listened to his audio commentary, and he was saying one thing that he really wanted to make clear in this scene is that all of this chaos that's happening with the fight and out of sustenance and all of that, the camera's really shaky, and it's like specifically kind of like sporadically moving around on the characters, and then we get the great shot where Sawyer sits down on the 2 aeroplane seats. First of all, love that the aeroplane seats are just there.
I love the aeroplane seats. They're used a few times in these early episodes, and it's always brilliant. It's always such a fun moment.
This is their most iconic use, in my opinion.
It is, but I enjoy Claire in like the pilot part 2 just randomly sitting on 2 plane seats in the middle of like the beach. There's like nothing else, and she's just sitting there. I think it's really fun.
No, that is really fun. And then the knife coming in right next to Sawyer's face. So good. I love that shot
powerful.
So much.
And Terry O'Quinn just actually threw those. There's a bit in a behind the scenes video, I think it's series 2 or 3, where part of the video is Terry O'Quinn, who plays John, just like teaching the camera. He's just being like, this is how you throw the knives, and he's like throwing them into a tree. And I was just like, he just does that. They didn't like,
I mean, I don't know if he was trained for the role or not.
Maybe he knew how to do it already, I don't know, but
just iconic, really.
It's just really great. I love that he just did it. Like, there wasn't any kind of effects or anything used. He just actually throws the knives.
And then after that moment, the camera becomes very steady, and it's this one sort of long continuous zoom on John while he says his sort of monologue to the whole group. And I think that's really powerful, and I love this scene. It's cool.
It's a great scene. It's a really great scene. Also, there's a moment in this scene where they say it's been 4 days. And I think they really make a point in these early episodes of mentioning the time frame a lot, which I really like. I like sort of being able to keep track of how long it's been in relation to how they, how they're talking and the kind of, just like the language they're using in their behaviour, and just saying whether they're still holding out hope of being rescued and that kind of thing. Because I think the abandoning the hope of rescue is a really interesting thing in the early episodes, where I think for some people, they already think,
there's no hope.
No one's going to come. And for others, they're still so certain that they're going to be able to get out. And I think it's a really interesting thing to look at in relation to the time frame. And so at this point, it's the 4th day. So presumably it's around about 1 day per episode.
Yeah.
Presumably, because it's the 4th episode. But then I think it's next episode we get told it's been a week. Something like that.
Oh, really?
I think it is, because next episode is White Rabbit, right?
Yeah.
I believe it's White Rabbit where they say it's been a week.
Well, we'll have to find out.
We'll find out.
But yeah. No, I really like that. And the writers are very careful about remembering how long it's been, how many nights, how many days we've had, and keeping the realism of it, really, because it's like, especially at the start, this kind of like the time really alters the characters.
Definitely, yeah.
Perception, experience. Like, imagine if you had been in a plane crash, right? And then it's like, you're getting over the initial shock, and then it's like, well, they're going to come and find us very soon. And then it carries on, and it just stretches out.
It's like, what happens after that?
Yeah.
And these next...
How many times have they had to go for a shit in a hole? These are the questions we need to be asking. These are the
questions we're asking. And I had a point to make, but you've completely blown out of my brain with the shit in a hole comment.
I'm sorry. Hey, we never see that,
We never see that. We never see
they never
that.
Show us
Maybe
that
for a good
of
reason.
Of the show.
They do actually mention shitting in the woods a few times.
A couple times.
There's a couple times it comes up. But actually, I was going to say, partially in relation to this, is that, which I was looking in this episode about who's changed their clothes. So Kate obviously has the orange t-shirt that she's had on last episode, and in the pilot as well. She changes quite quickly. But everyone else kind of has the same clothes on. But also, Charlie, in this episode, cuts the sleeves off his shirt.
I noticed that too!
Because in my my brain, that grey and black stripy t-shirt has always had no sleeves on.
Yes.
And then we watched the pilot and I was like, oh, hang on, it's long sleeve.
Oh,
and I've got it written down in, like, my notes on one of the other episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Where is it?
I only noticed that it was long sleeved in this episode.
Really?
Because there was one bit where my earring fell out again. He's hiding behind a tree, like,
to take his heroin,
drugs,
yeah.
and then Shannon comes over to him.
Yeah, so here in my notes from pilot part 2, it says, Charlie's top is long sleeve, but I swear it's a vest later. Maybe he rips the sleeves off.
There you
and
go.
I think it's interesting that happens mid-episode as well.
Yeah.
Because he has the long sleeves, and then Shannon asks him to catch a fish, and then the next time we see him, he's in the water catching the fish, and he's got no sleeves.
In my head, it's like he was trying and struggling to catch the fish, and then he was like, now it's time to get serious. And just rips the sleeves off.
I think in his head, that's how it happened. I think what really happened is he probably struggled quite a lot with taking his sleeves off. But
yeah.
It's interesting because, yeah, everyone else kind of hasn't changed clothes yet.
This episode is crazy because you've not only got, like, the main plots and the flashback, but you've also got a B plot and a C plot going on.
Yes, because we have all kinds of stuff going
I'd say
on.
the main plot is John, Kate and Michael hunting the boar.
Hunting the boar, yes.
Then you've got Jack and trying to clear the fuselage. And Claire getting ready for her memorial service. That's one plot.
And you also have the fish.
The fish ordeal.
The fish situation. There's also a teeny tiny D plot between Walt and the Koreans.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that scene.
A couple of scenes, which is really sweet.
The toothpaste bit.
The toothpaste scene is lovely because it's like no one seems to be making all that much of an effort to connect with these people. Like, I genuinely think that might be the only time this is a sweeping statement, but that might be the only time in the show where one of the characters makes an attempt to say the Korean version of the word.
Yeah.
Because when she's holding it up and she says something, I forget the word, and he says, oh, it's like toothpaste, and then she says the word again, and he copies.
Yeah.
And I don't think that really happens. I think
it does either.
The narrative is always teaching them to speak English. No one ever tries to do it the other way around.
We'll have to keep an eye out, but I think you might be right, you know. And actually, I've just thought as well that this seems to be a bit of a trend for Walt, that he kind of ends up making friends or approaching the characters who everyone else ignores.
Yeah, he's making these connections, I think, because he's just unafraid of doing that. Like, there's a really lovely conversation between Michael and Kate where she says, like, how's your son doing? And he's like, he's dealing with it better than I am.
Yeah.
But I think, Walt seems to be doing fine.
Yeah.
And everyone else is freaking out, and he's kind of already moved into the let's all make friends and get to know each other kind of phase of the plane crash, while everyone else is going, we need to ration the food.
Which you do actually get quite a nice amount of in this episode, because you get a lot of people going, it's Shannon, right? Or it's Claire, right?
There's a crazy moment in this episode where Claire walks up to Jack and goes, what's your name?
I know!
And I was like, she doesn't even know his name yet.
Yeah.
It's been like 4 days, and obviously Jack is like now designated in charge, because that's why she goes up to him. She says, could you say a few words? Mm-hmm. And she doesn't even know his name.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, and that does happen a lot in this episode. There's a lot of introducing yourself.
I think it's partially because it's like they're settling into this kind of island life a bit more, and it's partially because the writers are like, we can't keep this up.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to know each other's name now.
Everyone needs to get to know each other at this point, and then we move on.
Yeah.
No, definitely. There were some really nice moments of that in this episode. But I think, like, often the characters kind of get trapped in their narratives with their characters. Like, you have, like, the A-plot characters are always, like, Jack and Kate and John and Sawyer, and then you have the B-plot characters, and often they don't get to talk to each other very much, but in these early episodes they do all kind of just talk across those sort of lines a lot more. Nice. Those scenes are a lot more few and far between later in the seasons, but I always really like them. You know, they're always the really nice scenes.
So let's talk plot by plot a little bit. I think the one that we're going to be talking the least about is the fish plot, because personally, This is when Shannon starts to annoy me.
This is when Shannon just...
Like, up until now, she has been a bit of a brat, but it's like, whatever. The scene with, like, the French is really cool.
Yeah,
and she's had some fun
the scene with the
moments.
French, and the thing is, in the episodes we've had so far, it seems a little bit more like they're, you know, Shannon and Boone are just kind of young and kind of, I don't want to say stupid, but like, they're not as useful.
Yeah.
And they're not dealing with the situation very well. And they're just, like, being a little bit more, like, unhelpful, essentially.
Yeah, and they kind of almost exist as an antithesis to each other, because Boone really wants to help, but Shannon really doesn't want to help.
Boone really, really wants to help, but he's not very good at it.
Yeah.
And Shannon really doesn't want to help, but
she's also not very good at it.
She's also terrible at it, but Boone keeps forcing her to be involved.
Uh-huh.
And, yeah, but then in this episode, we just get... It's just bad. It's just bad. Like, that argument between them, fine, whatever. They've run out of food, and she's going to catch a fish. Fine, whatever. It seems the same a standard as a lot of their other arguments. You know, it's over something relatively trivial. You can't look after yourself. I have to look after you. This is the narrative we always get. But it's when she goes to Charlie, I'm just...
I do like how Charlie starts talking about his band again and then gets immediately shut down
gets
again.
cut off. It's very funny. And I like, this is a continuing narrative for Charlie, like, from episode 1. He's desperate for someone to recognise him and it's not happening. And that's funny.
Yeah. But it's Shannon about to piss me off. You know, the other day I said to my friend, it was such a funny sentence. I just went, Timothy Chalamet's starting to piss me off.
Starting to. He's been pissing me off since I learned of his existence.
But it's just
there are other actors.
Saying, like he's my friend.
There are other actors.
I don't like it. Yeah, this is the thing. This is my issue with Timothy Chalamet, because I think he's a fantastic actor. He's really talented, and I think he's really good in June specifically.
I mean, I haven't seen June. I've only seen him in Little Women, but admittedly, he's good in Little Women.
He's pretty good in Little
I think
Women.
he's a good actor, and I don't have any gripes with him personally. I mean, unless he's done something that I don't know about. But
it's just that he's in everything now.
Why is he so busy? Surely he's got other stuff he wants to be doing. He's in literally every film.
Girl, take a break. This is why he's starting to piss me off, because he's just everywhere now.
Like, take a breather. There are other actors. Hire someone else, please, for the love of God. Anyway.
Have you seen that video? This really makes me laugh. Of like, it's like Timothy Chalamet on the red carpet and some girl is like screaming. She's like, Timothy, I love you!
Maybe? I might have seen that. I don't know.
Whenever I get really like obsessive about someone, I immediately think of Timothy!
So the fish plotline I hate, really.
Well... I mean, it gives us... It's like the comedic relief, I guess.
It is a little bit... I guess the scene with Charlie and Hurley where they're fishing is quite fun. And I like when Charlie completely goes into the water. Yeah. That's very funny.
And also, like, we kind of see them having a bit of a laugh. Which is so hard to do given the circumstances.
Yeah, it's nice to see them having fun. And apparently, as we learnt from the audio commentary, I think I kind of would have liked this if they kept it in, was that the original ending of that fishing scene is that the Korean husband would walk up to the ocean and just grab a fish out of it with his bare hands. And I just think that would be such a funny ending. Because we've seen him fishing already.
Yeah.
Of course.
So we know
he knows how to fish, and there was this idea that he stands and watches them for ages, and then just walks up and grabs a fish and then walks away.
Because also he's not in this episode at all, is he?
He is right in it right at the beginning. You see the two of them waking up when the boar are asleep, when the boar are waking them all up.
Basically.
But that's it.
So it would have been nice for him to just pop in out of nowhere.
Yeah. No, I think it would have been funny. I think it would have been really fun. Yeah. But other than that, and then obviously the conclusion to that is just
shit,
terrible. But the C plot, not C plot, that's the C plot. The B plot with Claire, I love.
Oh yeah.
It's so sweet, and also I love that like Claire, she just like Jack's like, I don't care, like do what you want, and she's like, well okay, I will. and I'm going to carry on doing this thing even though you aren't interested, because I think we should. And I think that's really great from her.
Yeah.
Because there's a tendency to assume that Claire's quite passive, I think, because she's forced to be, because she's pregnant, so she can't go on the hikes or the adventures or anything like that. So there's a tendency to assume that, like, she just kind of has stuff happen to her. But often, she is very proactive in doing what she wants. And this is a really nice example of that, in that she wants to still read out everyone's names and talk about them. And I think it's really, really lovely.
I absolutely agree. And I think, as well, this is the first time, like... Well, when I watched this the first time, not so much on this rewatch, I thought it didn't actually come up that much, but I got a really strong sense of it when we watched it originally, is the kind of, like, breaking down of the leader character.
Yeah.
You know, I think what this show does in a really fun way is kind of, like, takes your assumptions about what a show like this will be and then invert them. And it's like, yeah, we all assume that Jack is going to be this perfect hero, this completely compassionate person, and it's like... And, you know, he's going to be the one that you go to in this scenario, like Claire does. And then him kind of rejecting that responsibility, or saying he's not comfortable, or whatever it is, whatever it is
that prompts him to just go, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And then for Claire to sort of step into that role.
Yeah, that she really then is in charge of constructing that narrative.
Yeah.
And no, I think it's really nice that they don't... Like, we've been told as viewers that Jack is our main character, Jack is our hero, he's the one, you know, who we see waking up in the forest after the crash. But really, narratively speaking, there isn't one person who's in charge, you know. We have Jack, of course, who's helping everyone immediately after the crash, but then we have Saeed, who's in charge of doing all the radio stuff, and who's been leading people in that sense, and he's the one who makes the big speech when they come back from taking the radio in the last episode. And we have John, who's the one who's in charge of hunting, and we have Claire, who's doing the memorial. And really, there isn't a leader quite yet, but still everyone's kind of defaulting to Jack.
Yeah, and I really liked the kind of way that the writing sort of subtly, I guess, says in this episode, but why? You know, why? Yeah. Jack's kind of like, why do I have to be the leader?
But why is he in charge?
I didn't ask for any of this.
And Jack actually spends this whole episode just sitting with Rose on the beach.
Yeah.
Which is probably really nice for him as well. He just gets to sit there and have a bit of a break and talk to her. And obviously we love that scene.
Even though there's a lot of kind of subtext going on in this moment. Like, it's quite an intense emotionally moment, I'd say. But yeah, we get 3 Rose and Jack scenes in this. Have we said that before?
I think so, yeah.
My earring, she said yeah. She said, girl, shut up, you've done this before.
I remember Googling when Titanic came out, and it was like 4 years before this was done.
Anyway, we get 3 scenes between them in this episode, and they're all great, in my opinion.
Oh, they're all fabulous.
I love the one where she doesn't speak at all, and it's just Jack kind of trying to get something out of her, and then going, do you know what, let's just sit here.
We can just sit here. And I really like that he stays, because I think Jack, he seems to be very stressed.
Yes.
Naturally so. And I think, like, the immediate knee-jerk reaction might be, oh, she's not responding to me, I'm just going to go do something else. You know, I'll come check on her later or whatever. But it's that, no, he sits there and he stays with her.
Yeah.
Because clearly she's upset.
Absolutely.
But she doesn't want to just tell a random stranger. And he's the one, really, who knows her out of everyone. And it's great to have that.
As Boone
saved her life,
reminds us.
And Boone, of course, doesn't know that they were sitting next to each other on the plane.
Which I love the sort of callback to that, because we've all forgotten that as well.
We've all completely forgotten
so much has happened since then.
Oh, and as we were talking about the deconstruction of why he's the leader, is we get one of my favourite lines, which is, I'm letting you off the hook.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep your promise to me. You don't have to keep me company until my husband gets back.
Oh, I love that bit. And then we get, you're suffering from post-traumatic stress.
Aren't we all?
Which is one of my favourite lines in the whole show.
That's one of the best lines. That kind of sums up the entire show. I think if someone asked me to sum up the whole show, I would play them that clip.
Yeah. Because it's just like, she's so matter-of-fact about it. And
Definitely.
completely correct as well. It's like, yes, she's going through a lot, but everyone is.
They're all having post-traumatic stress. They're all, like, freaking out.
Yeah. It's just a fantastic
It's
bit.
amazing, and of course the end of this narrative being, you know, all the people in the tail section are dead, and she just, of course, says, they're probably thinking the same thing about us.
Oh.
Crazy!
That's another kind of mind-blown moment, because I didn't even think about that.
I didn't even think about the people in the tail section. I was just like, the tail came off. Like, because the people who were in the nose bit, they're all dead.
Yeah.
As we know.
Yeah.
It's just, like... It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
We get a lot of little hints in this episode towards, like, the bigger sort of overarching...
Bigger story.
Mystical stuff, I guess. I guess the tail section, maybe not. But in a sense, yeah, because it's like, oh, what if they are alive on some other part of the island? Crazy. And then you also get Jack... again, immediately after this conversation, sees a man
in the woods.
And then he's like some kind of apparition or something.
In like a full suit. He can't get close enough to speak to him, so we don't know if he might be a survivor of the crash.
Yeah.
He might be a hallucination of some kind.
Yeah.
He could be someone from the tail section.
Oh, imagine if they're probably saying the same about us. Oh, look, he's over there.
Oh, look, there's my husband. That'd be so funny.
Hey!
We get, also in this episode, John seems to see the monster.
Yes.
And then
Which
lies about it, which is very interesting. Or does he lie? You know, maybe he didn't see anything.
I think it's implied that he sees
Maybe
something.
the real monster was inside of us all along.
Maybe the real monster was the friends we made along the way.
I think he does see something, but he seems to not want to tell people.
No.
So either he doesn't want to tell people because he knows it's going to scare everyone and he doesn't want to freak people out, or maybe he doesn't know what he saw and he can't explain it, or maybe like what he saw seems to be like really personal.
Or it was kind of, he's maybe trying to like protect the creature as well, possibly.
Yeah, maybe he's trying to protect the monster. I mean, of course, he has this knowledge that the island has sort of given him this magic, this ability to walk again. Maybe he's scared that if he tells everyone what the monster is, they'll take that away again.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, that's a huge thing that the island, this miracle has happened, but it's not necessarily something that's gonna stay.
That's so true.
You know, maybe he's so desperate to run off into the woods because he doesn't know if he'll ever get to hunt again.
Yeah. And as well, think about the mentality that we're operating on at the minute, you know. We're surrounded by death constantly. We've got killing of boars, killing of polar bears without second thought. If he goes, okay, the creature is this, they're going to be like, right, let's get all of your knives and go kill it.
Yeah, if he goes, oh, there's this Godzilla guy in the woods, they're going to be like, we have to go hunt it down. No, definitely. Another interesting indication we get of wider story in this episode is Saeed is handed this envelope full of photos.
Yeah, I love that little bit.
It's just a little indication of like they're going, and it's also a nice moment of like they're going through all these this stuff, there's like papers and things from people who've died, but also that some of the stuff in there belongs to the people who are still there. Yeah. There's not a lot of kind of finding your own suitcase and going, my favourite shirt, my favourite thing is here. Like, they're often just wearing each other's clothes and they're like, you know, they're not particularly attached to their own belongings. At least not at the minute. We haven't really seen that. And so this is a kind of moment of going, you brought things onto the plane with you that were important to you, and this is a thing you get back. And, I mean, we don't know who's in that picture. We don't know what that means.
But it's exciting.
But it is exciting, and it's nice to have those kind of little bits of story.
The moments of connection really come out with Claire's
definitely
memorial thing, because you even have Sawyer showing a softer side, don't you? Because he goes up to her and says, I found these passports when I was looting through people's suitcases. And I'd completely forgotten about that.
No, that's a really nice moment of where he clearly doesn't know how to be vulnerable about it. He's just like, just take them.
Yeah.
It's really lovely, and her little speech at the end where she's just talking about each of the people. It's so sad because it's like, up until now, all we think about is the people who've survived. You know, you never really go, but also, like, I don't know how many people would fit on a plane that size, but only about 50 people have survived that crash. That's got to be hundreds of deaths.
Yeah.
Like, that's awful.
Yeah.
It is. It's really, this is the kind of moment where they address that, where they say, yes, this is about survivors of a plane crash, but also some people didn't survive.
Yeah. And I think I was just thinking as well, like, the kind of machismo of Sawyer being stripped away. It reminded me of the bit where the obviously other very toxically masculine guy is the Korean guy, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then it made me think of the bit where he gives her the food.
Gives Claire the fish, yes.
Baby
and then
starts kicking. And it's kind of like there's like a little bit of moment of awkwardness, but kind of like connection there as well.
Yeah, I think Claire has this great ability to just kind of connect with people, it seems, which is really lovely to have. No, it's really great. In a complete segue, I don't think we're going to talk about the hunting trip all that much. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We've talked about him being hunted by the monster.
I've got a couple things.
But there's a moment with Michael and Kate where she climbs that tree, and to get the radio or whatever, up into the tree. And when she said, like, trust me, I've climbed a lot worse, I just got this really vivid image of her climbing a massive tree to escape the marshal, like in
oh my god!
Like, I mean, of course you haven't read Hunger Games, have you? But there's a bit in the Hunger Games where Katniss, who's a lot like Kate actually, she's being hunted by the other, like, kids in the arena, and she climbs up a tree, and then they're, like, trying to shoot arrows at her, and she just, like, takes one of the arrows out the tree and, like, waves it at them. And she just keeps climbing higher because they're too big to get to her. And I just got a really vivid image of the marshal, like, at the bottom of the tree being like, please come down, and she's like, nah.
That's so funny.
And I know that's probably not what she meant.
Deleted scene.
But in my head, that's what she meant by that.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. Yeah. No, I was going to talk about how here we have a pairing of Kate, Michael, and John. And I don't think we ever get those three in a plot line together.
No, it's an interesting trio where I think obviously Michael's motivation is that he wants to kind of suss out John a bit more. Because I think he knows at this point that Walt isn't going to do what he says. And, like, no matter how many times he says, don't talk to John, he's going to do it anyway. So I think this is his kind of attempt at being like, is he dangerous?
Yeah.
Is he going to be okay for Walt to go speak to?
And Kate's motivation
Kate obviously wants to get the radio up in the tree. Yeah. But it's a really interesting group of people.
And I think, unfortunately, we don't get that much of their dynamic as a trio. It'd be interesting to see. And I guess more down the line when they know each other and we know the characters a bit better.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye out for more interactions. But it's nice to have that from Kate as well, because obviously her last episode was very intense and was very much a sort of, she's a criminal and she's dangerous. And I don't think a lot of the characters know that.
No.
I think it was kind of really...
In fact, there's a really fun moment in this bit where Michael is talking about another awful thing that's happened, that Walt's mum has passed away.
Yeah.
And how he was going to Australia in order to pick him up, and then he says, what were you doing in Australia? And then we get like one look from Kate, and then she is saved by the bell, the bull. The ball.
Saved by the ball.
The ball comes the ball comes out and kind of very conveniently prevents her from having to try and come up with some kind of story or admit the truth.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that, like, it's again with the names and the being introduced and stuff, we're reminded that, like, we know everything, and the others really don't know that much about each other.
Yeah,
all the people in the crash, and that I think it's just Jack and Hurley who know.
I think so. Yeah,
that she's a criminal. Yeah, I think they're unless anyone heard Jack yell it on the beach.
Yeah,
he does a lot of that.
Very subtle.
He does a lot of yelling about major plot points. Imagine, like, you're just, like, going to have, like, a piss behind a tree, and then you can just hear Jack being like, what are we gonna do about the monster in the forest? Like, okay, great. Now I know there's a monster in the forest. You're not very good at this.
Yeah.
And that's, But then we get, what I was gonna say...
Sorry, yes.
Was that what we get from her is that we then had this image painted of her being dangerous and her being, like, potentially a villainous character, that then we get another really nice moment of connection where she's just asking if Walt's okay. And she wants to know about them.
Yeah, definitely.
Kate's also wearing a jacket in this scene. They never wear jackets. She's got, like...
You've written that down?
I've written that down. I've written Kate wearing a jacket, they never wear jackets. They don't. It's something I think about a lot. I'm a big fan of layers in terms of outfits.
Yeah, but it's boiling hot.
This is my point. Is that they don't wear jackets because it's so hot.
Yeah.
But she's got one on. Why?
Okay, I don't...
And I think it's her shirt that she was wearing during the crash. But I just think it's interesting. That's all. I notice the costuming a lot because I think about how they're repeating outfits and how they're wearing the same things that they've worn the whole time and how they're ripping their sleeves off and that kind of thing. And, like, clearly it's hot enough for Charlie to be taking the sleeves off of his shirt, but Kate's like, let me just slip into something a bit warmer.
Well, we did talk about this before, actually. I remember us mentioning how very few of the characters wear shorts. Lots of them wear long trousers. And then we realised it might be something to do with, like, trekking through the jungle. You're going to get, like, scrapes and maybe insect
ticks
bites.
and stuff.
Yeah, ticks. So maybe it was that. Maybe it was her trying to, like, cover up.
Maybe. That's
arms.
true. That's true. It could be. Maybe it's just because Charlie's English. You know? It's cold here.
It is cold here.
It's cold here. Maybe he's just... to be fair, Canada's, like, notorious for snow, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't think
So
it
maybe
quite
not.
fits.
Maybe not, but that's the implication. But yeah, no one wears shorts, really. Shannon has shorts on in this episode.
And I think Claire does as well.
I think Claire has still got her dress on, I think. But I think a bit
It's a dress, is
later...
I thought it was a top and shorts.
No, I think it's a dress, but then I think later on she's got shorts on.
Okay.
When she finally changes her outfit, I think she has shorts. Hurley has shorts on as well, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, they don't wear shorts often, and I think about that a lot because I just think it must be boiling.
Yeah.
You know? Here's something that annoyed me about this episode. When Kate comes back from the hunting trip and she goes to Jack and she's like, listen, John's dead.
Yeah.
The monster's got him. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's important. You need to tell Jack that. But the earlier part of that scene involves Jack absolutely manhandling Kate's face, for starters. Sort of doing this. Are you okay? What happened to your cheek? And she's like, I'm fine. At no point does she go, by the way, Michael's leg got gored by a boar. Maybe you should take a look at that.
Gored?
Gored.
Gored.
Gored, that's how he describes it.
Is it?
Yeah, when Walt's like, so you got in a fight with a boar, and he's like, more like, I got gored.
What does that mean?
G-O-R-E-D.
Oh,
Gored.
Okay. I was thinking G-A-W-E-D. I was like, gored.
Gored. You never heard gored before?
No, not as a verb.
It's like when you've like a monster. I've only ever heard it in in reference to like animal attacks, often with horns.
Right.
You get gored.
Is it in relation to like it being gory?
I guess so. I've heard it in the like a boar and then like deer antlers, like stag antlers. Someone's been like injured and then they're like, I got gored
I see.
by a deer.
I've never heard that before.
Never heard that before?
No.
God, clearly you are not a man of the world.
Or a person who watches Sweet Tooth. I assume that's where the deer antlers came from.
Yes. Gored shaped with a gore.
Well, that's cleared that up though.
Oh, what does it mean to be gored to death? If you stabbed someone with a sword, you gored them. An animal with sharp horns, like a bull, can gore a person to death. Gore is also blood that's clotting in a wound. An unbloody, unrelated meaning of gore is a triangle-shaped piece of cloth used in making umbrellas, sails, and some clothes.
Wow. The more you know.
You learn something new every day.
I was also thinking about gourd, G-O-U-R-D, which is like a pumpkin or a swede or
gourd,
something.
Yeah. I think also like a jug.
A jug?
Like, you know the ones that are like the old-timey, like, sort of animal skin with like and you put water in it? I think that can be called a gourd.
Can it?
Or like a jug.
So many meanings
Jug
to
situation.
This word,
Gourd.
The triangular bit of cloth, that's my favourite one.
Oh, it's just coming up with pictures of pumpkins.
If you were holding an umbrella when you were attacked by a boar, could your gore be gored?
Could you use the gore to prevent a goring? Hit the boar with the umbrella.
And feed the boar a gourd.
You could, to prevent being gored.
To prevent being gored. But the boar then might gore the gourd.
Yes, and that would be bad.
And that would be bad. Don't know why that tickled me so much, but it did.
And that would be bad.
That would be bad.
So speaking of the boar...
Not good. Gored. Good.
It would be bored.
I'm bored.
Speaking of boar... something we learnt from the audio commentary was that the
Oh my
boar...
god, how have we not brought this up yet?
So they had boar, like domesticated boars, to run. But the thing is, pigs and boar are very closely related. In the way that literally, if you release a pig into like a forest, within a few months, it can turn boar mode. It can like grow tusks. I've seen like pictures of this, I think. I might have just read it online somewhere, but it will like grow tusks and essentially become a boar. So these domesticated boars just looked like big pigs. And they were like, right, well, that's not scary.
Yeah. First of all, they weren't scary, and second of all, they'd eaten too much that day, so the trainer was like, they don't want to run.
They didn't want to run. They didn't want to run, and then there's a thrilling quote from the director, which was, you know what it's like as a director when you have all these boars. Classic Universal director experience.
We've all been there. And yeah, I think one of them was, I can't remember the name now, but it was a conversation between the director and the writer that we heard on the audio commentary.
Yeah.
And he was like, I realised it was going to be a problem when you turned to me the day before shooting and said to me, what if there weren't any boars?
Yeah, they floated
about
they
it.
floated the idea of it being a sort of mystery animal that was
Yeah.
eating the bodies.
But then they realised that would be dumb because they'd just be going out into the wild to hunt. Question mark.
Nothing. They don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So eventually they just kind of went for the glowing eyes and the silhouettes.
Yeah. And so every time you see a boar, in this episode at the very least, it's CGI'd.
Yes.
So there's actually no boars in the episode at all, which is
interesting.
fact.
It is interesting.
Also, we said so much about gore and gorge that every time we say boar, it sounds weird to me now. I'm like, you know, like sort of the past tense of like birth, like you bore a boar.
Boar, yes, B-O-R-E.
And like a chopping board and a board game and your board. Like so much is running through my head right now.
Gourd. I feel like I've heard gourd used as a word for head before. My god.
I think that's in relation to the root vegetable thing.
I think so. It's like when you call your head a melon.
Yeah.
My god.
Could you score a gourd on a chopping board?
You could. And then you could feed it to a boar to prevent being gored.
Mm-hmm. And that boar has born...
Has boar a boar.
It's boar a boar.
Boar a baby boar.
And I gave it... and I wrapped it up in a triangular piece of cloth, also known as a gore.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Let's talk about the dog. Very funny, very, very funny thing we learnt about Vincent this episode is that right at the beginning, of course, Vincent can see the boar and the others can't, because obviously dogs can see in the dark.
Oh, is that why?
I think so, yeah.
I thought it was like they were going for a bit of a Signs vibe, you know?
It could be, but I think that's the vibe, but I think in practicality it's probably...
I should explain that in case anyone has no fucking clue what I talked about. A Signs vibe, you know?
Signs vibe.
Just kind of like, you know, roadwork ahead energy. No, the movie Signs by M. Night Shyamalan. Am I pronouncing that right?
M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah. The movie Signs by M. Night Shyamalan is about aliens coming to Earth, and...
It's like the origin of crop circles.
Is it?
Yeah, so like crop circles being a thing done by aliens, I think first came from Signs.
Movie. Wow.
So,
it's an incredible movie, by the way.
I'd highly recommend it. It's a really good film.
And all of the animals can sense that something's wrong before the humans can. And
it's on a farm. It's set on a farm.
It's set on a farm. And the dogs are always barking and stuff. And then one of them gets like really... They all die in like horrible ways or something.
I think one of them gets like mauled by an alien or something.
Gored by an alien. I don't remember. But anyway, I thought that's kind of what they were going for. Like, ooh, what does the dog know that we don't? You know, that kind of mystical...
I definitely think that's a part of it, but I think if you want to be sort of cynical and be like, it's not magical at all, it also makes sense, because, like, dogs can smell and see things that humans can't.
Yeah, that's very
So true. I think, like, he could probably just smell that there were boar around. But they said in the audio commentary that in order to get the dog to bark, they had the trainer standing off camera shaking a lampshade at him. And they were like, we don't know why, that was what got him all riled up, but it was.
Sure did.
Shaking a lampshade. And all the other times in the previous episodes where, like, Vincent's in the woods and he's watching them all walk past tennis ball every time. Mm-hmm. It's like they're pulling a tennis ball past the camera, and then that's what the dog's looking at.
Maybe the lampshade got him because he hates David Byrne.
Maybe.
And I'm not going to explain that one. Google it.
They nearly named this episode Lord of the Files.
Yes, we need to address this. Lord of the Files. Apparently one of them stormed into the office and was like, you'll never guess what, I've got the best title for this episode ever. I mean, I enjoy.
Listen, it's a good pun, but I think it's a bad title for the episode.
Because I think too goofy, isn't it?
It's a bit too silly. There's a few episode titles later in the series are a bit too silly. And they like their puns in this show, and I'm happy about that. You know, I think puns are fun. I always like a good pun, but sometimes they're just a bit silly. Mm-hmm. And also, it gives away a bit too much, I think.
That's very true.
Because it's like, yes, he works at a box company, mm-hmm. and he does, you know, filing, but we don't know that. And in his introduction, getting this, like, menacing menacing man. I mean, I guess he is an animal. Manimal. This menacing man, and then we get the whole Colonel Locke thing.
Yeah, it definitely would have ruined that.
It gives that away. It gives all that away, and I think... I understand that obviously the island has a very Lord of the Flies energy.
Yeah. See, can we address this for a second? I have a really... In my head, it was... I have a really distinct memory of, you know, that scene in the previous episode where, is it the previous episode? Where Jack is looking for the medicine and Sawyer is crouched in the top of the
Yes,
plane.
That's the previous episode.
Yeah.
Because he's looking for medicine for the Marshal.
Yes. I forgot that the Marshal died only in the last episode. Yeah. So in that scene, when Sawyer, like, has the torch under his chin and all of that, in my head, he definitely says, like, you know, like, wake up sheeple, wake up Doc, you know, we're in Lord of the Flies now.
No, he's not, he's in the wild.
I really definitely said we're in Lord of the Flies, or this is Lord
Maybe
of the
he
Flies.
says that a bit later on, because I feel like someone does bring up Lord of the Flies at some point.
You surely have to.
Surely.
I really thought he said it in that moment, and so I was so confused when he didn't. Well, we'll have to watch out for
We'll have to keep an eye out for it, but maybe he does later on.
Lord of the Flies cam. We're going to be spotting it.
Yeah.
Live Lord of the Flies reaction.
I'm really glad it wasn't named Lord of the Files. I just think... And I think Walkabout is a lot more of a mysterious episode title.
Like, Walkabout, even though we know it's the name of the excursion that he was going to go on, is still a really, like, poignant title, right? Because it's like,
walk.
He can walk.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously the episode ends with one of my favourite kind of moments.
Is beautiful. With, like, the whole plane on fire and, like, Claire stood there and the crowd. And then that really wide shot where it pans down and Jack is on the beach away from everyone else. I think that's beautiful.
Brilliant. And then just seeing the wheelchair in front of the fire and John obviously smiling. I actually noticed the wheelchair last episode.
Yes, it's when Charlie is pulling the suitcases,
yes,
right?
when Charlie's really undignifiedly helping Claire with the suitcases. the wheelchair is on that trolley. And I was like, oh, I think
he's using the wheelchair.
Yeah, and then in this episode, when they're collecting wood to burn the fuselage, one of the extras has like a wheelchair stacked with wood, and then tips it onto the stack.
It's so clever the way they put it in. And we found out in the audio commentary that when they were originally writing it, this wasn't even a plot point.
No.
John wasn't even going to be in a wheelchair until suddenly there was like a
sort of brainwave moment,
where one of them figured out that it was like perfect, and then they had to retroactively go in and insert a wheelchair into shots of the pilot, because they'd filmed the pilot and then they had this idea.
Yeah, then they put the wheelchair in, which I think is really interesting.
Crazy, right? Imagine! Like, this wasn't even going to be John's character originally.
No, it's crazy.
How wild is that?
It is wild. It's wild. And the, that shot of the wheelchair is really lovely. I don't know what it is, something about this watch through. I've just been so emotional about all of it. Everything keeps making me cry.
Aww.
And I was watching this end moment, and I was like, oh, it's so sad. I do this a lot, to be fair.
I think. And, I mean, the wheelchair isn't actually on fire, which I only realised because they made a very good point about it in the audio commentary. They're like, it's not on fire, by the way. But, like, to me, I always thought it was set on fire. I think we all did, right?
It's a trick of the eye. It was on fire. It looks, because it's right in front of the fire and it's shot in such a way that the fire looks like it's a lot closer behind it than it is.
Yeah. So, to me, I was like, the wheelchair going up in flames is such an incredible thing for Locke, because it's like, that chapter of my life is over. This is this is new, this is like a rebirth almost.
Yeah, and I think he is one of those characters who's immediately given up hope of being rescued. I'm not sure he even wants it. I think he is like, this is my new life.
Yeah.
He's immediately kind of accepting that. And it's a really nice contradiction as well with like how we have with Walt as well, of him being a much happier character. Like especially like now, of course, we know why in the pilot he seemed so happy and he seemed to be enjoying himself so much, in that he can walk, and that's a miracle, and he just doesn't want to tell anyone because everyone else is too busy freaking out, understandably so. I think that's a really nice kind of comparison to have.
I also think on some level he is still carrying some shame of his disability, because obviously we see a lot of that in the flashbacks, how he doesn't tell the people who are running the walkabout that he's in a wheelchair. And he has this whole "don't tell me what I can't do" thing, and I think he still carries that a little bit in his character even on the island, and so that's partially why he doesn't want to reveal that to anyone, I think.
No, I think I agree with that. I think he definitely seems, with his anger and things like that, to be very... I think if he was to tell people, they would see him as a much more vulnerable character. And I think he obviously doesn't want that. He wants to be seen as someone who can hunt and who can be in charge and who can help them all. And he thinks, whether rightly so or incorrectly so, that they will see him differently if they know that he was in a wheelchair. Also, it would change the tone of what everyone else... Like, maybe they wouldn't believe him, maybe they would just think it was a shock thing, like you said at the beginning when we were at the beginning of this episode. Like, I don't think I'm mad at him for not saying anything, because obviously it's a very personal thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a really nice personal journey for him over this episode that we get, where no one else is really involved. No one else is like a catalyst to him having this moment.
Yeah. And again, it's like with Kate, how we know she's a criminal, but no one else on the island does.
No one else really does.
They're still not open with each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of the wonderful framing in this episode with the shots of his toe, I love them.
The toe wiggle. The toe wiggle is beautiful. And also, like, if you go back and look at the pilot, what you see is Jack and John pulling the guy with the leg out of the engine, and John turning around and yelling at the guy to get away from the guy who gets sucked through the engine that's on. And to think, like, we saw that happen, and that was his first time standing up in 4 years.
I mean, how? I
crazy
literally just got chills just then. How
That's crazy.
That? Yeah. It's such an incredible moment, especially the kind of like reshot bits.
It's the fact that we see it right at the beginning, and we get obviously a classic eye opening. This is our first time, I think, of the repeat of the eye opening.
Yes, because the only one we've had before is Jack, right?
And we get this immediate indication this is going to be a repeated like motif. And we get the eye opening, and we see him, and at that point, like, all that really establishes is this episode's about John. Then to see the exact same scene again, knowing what we know before.
Oh, yeah.
I still remember when we first watched it, when the shot changes and John like pulls out from the desk in his wheelchair and he's going after the Australian guy and he's yelling at him. My stomach like dropped seeing that for the first time, because I was like, oh my god.
That was an incredible moment, yeah.
Like, it's just like it has such an insane shock factor, that moment, that's so like...
And this is why it's one of my favourite episodes, purely for that scene, really. Well, I said the telephone one was my favourite flashback. It is, however, you can't deny the impact of that.
No, it's
reveal.
It's a fabulous scene.
Oh my god.
It's the way it's shot just so well, all of this episode, that you don't believe, but looking back, there's all these indications that something's going on, you know. There's all the like the little slights that Randy makes, the boss, and there's the fact that you never see him walking, and even like when the boar attacks them and he's laying on his back and he just suddenly looks so scared.
Yes, oh my god.
That like, and it's like obviously like he's fallen on his back, and he clearly is, you know, it feels the same as when he woke up on the island and he could move his legs, that like he must be terrified that he's going to try and get up and it's not going to work. Yeah. It's so brilliant. It's some brilliant acting from Terry O'Quinn as well.
Yeah.
It's really incredible.
Also, I don't know if you immediately thought this, but I did when you first see that opening shot of John. Dad's got those socks.
Does he?
Dad has definitely got those socks.
I didn't notice the socks, really.
They're like black with yellow and black stripy on the toe.
Oh yeah, he's got those
Dad's
socks.
got those socks.
Dad's got those socks, definitely.
Dad dresses like a menial office employee. This is what we've learned. Also, side note, we are big fans of What We Do in the Shadows, and like John's workplace always reminds me of Colin Robinson's office.
Oh yeah, John's kind of aesthetic pre-Crash is very Colin Robinson core.
Yeah. Can you call it an aesthetic? I guess you can.
Anything's an aesthetic if you want it to be.
If you're brave enough.
Office core.
Office core. The like fluorescent lighting.
The horrible fluorescent lighting, the cubicles, the like white shirt with the big blue checks.
Yeah. It's
the like you know, trousers, all of it.
It's Colin Robinson coded. I bet there's a few energy vampires in that office.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
And one like tiny detail about those flashbacks as well that they mentioned in the audio commentary, I mean, I'd noticed it but I'd not really paid attention to it before, is the vending machine, and how they were saying, yeah, we like to put these little things in the flashbacks to just sort of act as a reminder of everyday convenience that they've lost.
Yeah, things they don't have anymore. And I think that's really great, because this is the first time we see a sort of normal life.
Yeah.
In a flashback, because
Kate's anything but.
Life is anything but normal, and also like a farm in rural Australia is not necessarily something that we're all familiar with as a setting. So it feels a bit more like this is new, whereas John's office, that's somewhere we all know.
Yeah.
And
if you're us, playing those kind of tabletop games is something you will know.
It's something you know, and that is a really, really great kind of contrast, especially with a character like John, who seems to be so connected to the island immediately, and is really in the wild, Sawyer. that is a really interesting contrast to have, of how he seems so stifled and so like pushed down in his previous life, and now seems so different. Completely.
I love the contrast that we get between John on and off island in this episode. I think something that I'm discovering on this rewatch is that in the early episodes the flashbacks are done so well.
The flashbacks are brilliant.
They're like used really judiciously, and they're like, again, we only get four in this episode. I think we had 3 in the previous one, and it's like they're shot really well, they're succinct. I like the flashbacks.
No, the flashbacks are really brilliant. I think the flashbacks get a bit tired later on. I love the flashbacks. I love a lot of the flashbacks. I love a lot of the backstory that we get. But there are moments where you just go, it seems like they're doing this just because all the other episodes have done this.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, you can really tell...
They get trapped.
They were done for a reason.
Yes, this is the thing. They forget. When it gets to the later series, they forget why every episode has flashbacks in it.
It becomes just the structure of the show.
Yeah.
And often the flashbacks are not needed. There are certain episodes where the characters just do something completely left field that you're like, why would they do that? Why do I need to know that they did that?
Yeah. Season 3, not to get ahead of ourselves, but season 3... Each of the main characters has one episode where everything goes wrong. Like, they just do something that's so out of character, and it's just a completely...
They have just, like, every...
pointless and meaningless flashback, and it's just like, why? We didn't need to see
They have these wild, out-of-pocket flashbacks that establish nothing new in the plot, and just seem to be done for the sake of having flashbacks.
Yeah.
And it is really nice, I agree with you, to look at these early episodes and go, there was a reason these were done.
Yeah.
There was a reason these were written in, and it's really nice to have it shown rather than told. Like, rather than it being that the characters gradually open up about their lives, we actually find out what these important events are for them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really great way of doing it. Okay, I think that's everything I have to say about this episode.
Yeah, me too. The only other thing that I was going to mention is Saeed's little hissy fit, which I love.
Yes, I love his little hissy fits.
Throws the machinery on the floor.
Because everyone, especially Saeed, but everyone has been relatively collected. Like, since the crash, like, during the actual crash, everyone's screaming, everyone's running around, everyone's freaking out. And then after that, everyone seems to have been very sort of practical, and especially someone like Saeed has been very collected and very logical and very calm, that suddenly to be able to just have that little fit and to be a bit like, everything's awful, and that's really lovely. And it's really sweet, and it's very funny because it's the way he just throws it down, and he has a few of those across the series which are very funny. And it's nice to see those emotions from people, you know? Like, often you get sort of anger, and you get, like, certain characters crying when they've been through something.
But pettiness?
Pettiness is rare. And it's
just
nice.
Kind of, like, that kind of, like, instant frustration.
Yeah.
Just like a, and then it's like, we'll try it again. It's like, yes, we'll try it again.
Not like a build-up of some crazy big...
to let that out.
Some crazy big outburst of anger. He's not fighting anyone. He's just like... I just need to have a little bit of hissy fit, and then you're going to go, are you okay? We're going to do it again. And he's like, yes, I'm fine. We're going to do it again. It's great.
Completely. And I think that's all I had to say. I mean, we talked about Claire's funeral service, and
it's lovely.
How beautiful that is. And Jack's kind of like transition of,
Jack's really interesting to me in this episode because he doesn't do very much. He spends the whole episode just sitting with Rose, and I think that's really nice.
But
as a break.
He goes on a bit of a journey, like, himself. In the first scene, he's being the leader, going into the plane, you know. Second scene, he's making decisions, but he's doing it in a kind of almost callous way. He's saying, like, look, I don't like this, but we need to burn all of these bodies, essentially. And then we get him kind of going, why do I have to make these decisions? Why do I have to be the bad guy? Why is all this awful? And then kind of like the placidness, the kind of break, the kind of almost meditation thing, where he sits with Rose.
And then obviously culminating in seeing the person standing in the jungle.
Yeah.
But then that's an immediate spike back up for Jack, which is, it's a really interesting arc to go on over the episode. Rather than it being loads of action and then things calm down at the end, it's like things are calm in the middle and then the action ramps up right at the end. And, you know, hopefully we'll find out more about this action soon.
So that's a really nice way to end this episode of the podcast, by talking about Jack and how that's a little hint for what's coming up next week.
Soon.
So thank you very much for joining us today. I mean, I'm proud of us. I'm proud of you, Velvet.
I'm proud of us for making it through.
Today's been...
It's been...
I think we brought the energy back up. We needed this.
It's been one of the most days of all time.
It has. But we needed to just talk about Lost.
No, it's been good. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed today.
So thank you very much for listening and going on this journey with us. This emotional walkabout that we have been on this week. As always, follow us on social media. We are on everything. We're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Tumblr. Yeah. Follow me on Instagram at Ariel Hebditch.
And at Velvet Hebditch. And we will be back with you again next week. I've had a lovely time.
My voice is slowly dying. I think I've inhaled too much hairspray.
My legs are sore. I need to get up.
I need to retrieve my earrings. It's been a shambles, but we made it through. Thanks very much, everyone.
We'll see you next time.
See you next week.